Catch those springtime vibes all over Arizona. Break out of the winter blues by hitting the water at one of our lake and river parks. Take a hike among the wildflowers. Just make sure to stay on the trails and leave the flowers for the bees. Discover Arizona's best kept secret and visit azstateparks.com/amazing to start your springtime adventure.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. A lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
This is a podcast from Minute Media.
Hashtag no music, no intro. It is time for this amazing podcast. Thanks to Ryan, we were able to get the amazing Cynthia Frelund of NFL Network on the show again around the same time as we did last year. We truly appreciate, Cynthia, you coming on our podcast and talking the Saints, talking draft. This is, like for a lot of football fans, our Christmas time is next week. And so we just thank you for coming on and joining our podcast again.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I really appreciate it. It's super fun. And this is quite the time of year. And you guys are so dedicated. I always appreciate what you guys are doing. And I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So I'm going to just start with the hard-hitting questions right out the gate. Will you be joining Ryan, myself, Greg, and Mark Sessler at the Sugar Factory next week in Vegas?
Oh, man, I wish. I'm only going to be out there for about a day because the shows I'm on are from here, but we have like an NFL, like the Partner Summit, which is like a corporate thing. So I'm going to bounce out there for I'm thinking like 16 hours in Vegas and then I'll come back, which is like a lot of time in Vegas if you think about it.
It is. I hope you're coming. I hope you're leaving from Burbank instead of LAX because that's a mess in itself. But we put out an amazing article, I believe it was last week, in regards to draft comparisons and comps for quarterbacks in this draft class. And we've heard there's just been so much rhetoric and talk about these quarterbacks. But Ryan saw your article. He reached out. We really wanted to get you on. And I guess just from just broad layman terms, like when you ran the data, you ran the stats, what was surprising to you when you did the article in terms of quarterbacks in this year's draft class?
It's funny because when I look at this class, we don't think it's the best class. Okay, great. But the reality is perhaps because this isn't the strongest class, that the guys will be drafted by teams that don't have as high of immediate expectations, which actually can lead to more long-term success. Because in reality, a lot of what happens is, we unfortunately they're forced to start right away, whether or not they're ready. So the good part for the actual guys who are being drafted is they probably have a better opportunity to become at least longer term starters because they won't be asked this season to do as much. So I'm not suggesting this is the best class ever. I'm not suggesting that anyone from this class is Joe Burrow or remember how we all felt about Andrew Luck, for example. But I also think maybe we've gone too far the other direction in saying that, none of these guys are worth where they'll be drafted. And that's just not true either.
No, I completely agree. And I like that you brought that up because there's so many different factors that go into, a quarterback having success. And obviously talented is being talented is number one. But, I think about guys who get drafted early, get drafted top 5, it's just if they're going to a team in the top 5, they're going to a very bad team, possibly a bad franchise that, has historically been bad. So that's just one thing counting against them. And, usually, quarterbacks that are really talented, really good can survive that. But some can't. Like I wonder, like, what if Sam Bradford went to like a, upper echelon team years ago, or what if, just insert a name there, QBs that failed over time, what would have happened to their careers if they landed in some other place? So I just think that's interesting to look at it, and just the way people talk about this whole quarterback class. I mean, look, some of the great quarterbacks or even real good quarterbacks we've had over the years, not all of them were, the most talented or the most sought after, talents coming out the draft. So I think, that article you wrote, just kind of with the pro comparisons, was interesting because it kind of led to what I was kind of thinking, which is why I liked it. Because it was like, okay, like I could see that, not that they'll become those exact players that, you comp to, but just that those were players that actually had like long careers, and you could actually see that in some of these players coming out.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because people forget that, like, the, the number of Drew Brees or Tom Brady or, Aaron Rodgers or even Patrick Mahomes is very small. Most teams, there's only 32 of these jobs every single week, up to 32 if there's all 16 games. And these are really, really the best of the best. So to say that, a lot of people are down on, for example, Sam Howell isn't getting as much press or publicity as some of the other quarterbacks, at least not nationally. And if you look at Sam Howell, he's the best on third down, third and deep. And that's a true passer's down. And his numbers in his senior season this past year, 2021 at UNC, they reflect losing, De'Ami Brown and Michael Carter and, Javonte Williams, some pretty good people and pieces around him. So it's just interesting how like the narrative and perception can shape a lot of it. I mean, people didn't think Dak Prescott was going to be very good coming out of college. So the reality is that it really matters where you're going, where you end up, who's teaching you, who's around you. And then there is a little bit element of, don't get hurt. The luck factor is a big deal. You talk about Sam Bradford, look at Sam Darnold even, it got really difficult for him. And let's be honest, like, I don't know if he's not, Sam Darnold was a very highly touted prospect, obviously. I mean, he got drafted very highly. So, and part of it is because he didn't end up in a system that really allowed him to become his best self. So, we'll see if that changes. But as of right now, it doesn't seem like Sam Darnold is worth the number 3 overall pick or whatever that he was.
I think you hit on it, because something that I've tweeted, and maybe I'm just getting annoyed about just the continual dialogue about this quarterback class not being good. It's a bad quarterback class. And I just bring up points of Patrick Mahomes was a generational talent. But in the draft that he was in, he was not viewed as a generational talent, or else the Bears wouldn't have drafted Mr. Trubisky over him. The 49ers wouldn't have drafted Solomon Thomas over him. So saying that quarterback classes are good or bad, there's some bit of revisionist history in regards to things like that. And so it's something that's just been on my radar a lot this season. One of my favorite prospects in the draft, quarterback or not, is Kenny Pickett. Ryan and I got to see him up and close at the Senior Bowl, got to interview, ask him a few questions, see him practice. And it's funny because when I read your article, and you can ask Ryan this, a couple of days before you posted it, I told Ryan, I said, I see some Derek Carr in Kenny Pickett. And then your article comes out, and that's kind of what his pro comp was. And he just strikes me, I think personally, I think he comes across as a better prospect than Mac Jones was last year. But is there anything that kind of in your stats kind of shows that the kind of quarterback that Kenny Pickett is, in the pocket passer, doesn't have a lot of athleticism off script, is how that's kind of just meddling in terms of just the NFL, and that's just not the in vogue thing anymore?
Life's about supply and demand, and what's coming out of college, typically it looks a little bit more like, Matt Corral has like 67% of his passing yards came off play action, which if you would have said that even 7 8 years ago, people would have said that's gimmicks, right? They would have said is it real? Is it not? And now people are like, oh, he's an athlete. Because he can run too. So a lot of it is like how it's branded and perceived. And a lot of it is like what style offenses college quarterbacks are playing with and college offensive coordinators. Remember, it's only going to get even murkier here until everything becomes, like the what is it, like the Adam Smith invisible hand thing, where like, you have like between NIL and you have the transfer portal as two significant changes that have happened in the past few seasons. Remember, now your kids are demanding, there's more power in the college athlete. They're demanding more, things, be it money, be it opportunity for, their stats to look good. They believe this is what gets them drafted. They play this way. So, it's just interesting. We're going to see until it kind of evens out, there's pent up kind of demand for people not being able to earn money in college, number one, and two, leverage the transfer portal to its full ability yet. Once that levels out and things kind of get back to equilibrium, I think the stats will be easier to discern. But Kenny Pickett's stats, interestingly enough, just, he has pretty good, his data is not bad. Like his deep ball, it doesn't have the velocity of a lot of guys. And I don't know if it's because his hands are small or because he just doesn't have the motion that some guys do. I mean, Josh Allen threw 66 miles an hour. Like that's a ridiculous number. Like and it's not sustainable to keep always getting bigger. So I think he probably gets overly dinged because the way some people were coming out of, this feeling about athletic quarterbacks and, even Joe Burrow, like he had smaller hands too, but that guy slanged it. So it's not like, it's attributes and how we kind of think about them and where they ultimately, he's the most pro ready. Like there's no, look, if you look to see how many times he's faced, multiple fronts, how many times he's faced disguised defensive backs, man versus zone, that's not initially able to be diagnosed. He has the most pro-like resume already. And that's a big deal because the learning curve, if you have a long learning curve, it's going to be far harder at quarterback for you to succeed than if your learning curve looks a little bit more like the pros. That's just the math bears that out, So at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm not going to call him not as athletic. I'm not going to call him, I'm not going to call him not as good off script because I don't know really I don't really know how they taught things at Pitt. I don't really know what was expected of him. But what I do know is that in the face of seeing things that didn't look like a traditional easy base defense, he did it the most and he was the best at it. I don't know if that answers your question, but but that's how I view it. Oh, did we get disconnected?
No, I'm here. Sorry. No, that did answer my question, and thank you for kind of clarifying that. This draft class is, as ones have been in the past, is very wide receiver heavy. One of my favorite prospects is Jamison Williams. Obviously, he's hurt, which is going to potentially cause him to fall in the draft. Before he was injured and before he got injured in the national championship, what did the numbers and the data kind of show how he was as a player?
So this draft class does have a lot of wide receivers, but a little bit more flavor. Like, what's your sort of wide receiver as opposed to last season? We had some that were similar profiles that you had to discern between that were a little bit more like full spectrum of wide receiver, talent. Look, Jamison Williams to me before getting hurt was my number one wide receiver in this draft class. Garrett Wilson was a close second. Now Garrett Wilson's number one because his route running, he's a very good technician with his route running. They teach that well at Ohio State. And I could say that because if you look year over year, the types of routes coming out of Ohio State are really, really, they're crisp, they're clean. The guys know how to execute. They keep doing it. So that's interesting. But Jamison Williams, the thing that's interesting about him is his body control and his ability he's not a possession receiver. That's like not a bad thing, but he's not a possession receiver. He can run with the ball in his hands. He gets his hips going in the right direction. He has fluidity. And to me, fluidity is defined as, being able to adjust and make adjustments without it changing, losing speed. The change of direction, losing speed, adjusting to the ball, adjusting to an underthrow, adjusting to an area that he wasn't expecting. So he's the one that's the most complete and the one that looks the most like a pro, like I said, pro ready, that learning curve being shortened. That was what stood out about him. I don't have medical stuff on him. The best I heard was that October would be a time frame for him to return. So that you have to factor that in, because obviously, like where you draft someone dictates your expectations of them. But he's a really interesting prospect, and I like watching him a lot. He's super fun. I like all the top guys are great for very different reasons, though.
Gibby, yeah, and I'm sorry I was muted earlier. I was asking you a question, but I'm so interested in this computer vision.
Yeah.
So the things you were just talking about, you were talking about the crisp routes coming out of Ohio State. Is that something your computer vision software tracks? Like you're able to actually track the crispness of routes? Like how is that possible?
Yeah. So you track it because how consistently, so there are thresholds. You can't, like, obviously if I walked a route, it would be incredibly consistent, but it would be too slow. So you have to go at game speed. How often are you where you need to be and creating separation from your nearest defender on each of the routes? And it's fun to track. And those Ohio State guys they really can do a good job of that. I mean, you've got one down there in New Orleans if he decides he wants to play and is healthy. So, you know what I'm talking about that. But ultimately, you see it from Terry McLaurin. You see it. Chris Olave, also in this draft class, is very skilled at it as well. So they're just like, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's that they select for those types of players when they're finding, high school wide receivers, or if they're teaching it. My guess would be probably some version of both. But they're in this place that they need to be and creating separation at a reliable rate and a very nice and quarterbacks in the NFL, they like that.
And you also mentioned in the article, and you just mentioned about Kenny Pickett's velocity. Is that something that computer vision tracks also? Like I always thought about that. I was like, why don't we track velocity of the ball from like just looking at it on the screen? You should be able to figure that out. So computer vision does that for you? Yeah.
The thing is it's not, it's what I'm going to say is it's absolutely right. Meaning like compared to, so like you can only track, the way that the video captures a ball, I can track when it's released, and I can track how much time goes by before it gets to a certain area. I don't have the third dimension, which is how high the arc goes. So it's not going to be perfect, but it's, like you make a ranking order, right? And so it's not like completely perfect, but like on an absolute level, this is faster than this. This one is slower than that. Like you can rank things, which is helpful, but it's not like the precision is lacking. But if you're measuring everything with the same imprecise tool, you can get a pretty reliable indication of ranking. Again, it's absolutely right, meaning like the absolute, like the changes between the two, but I wouldn't rely, like the number that comes up doesn't mean much, right? Like you can have like a velocity, but you just know that this one's higher than that one.
Right. It's relative. I got you.
Yeah. The relative factor and like the absolute distance between things are fine, but it's not perfect. Oh, are you there?
I feel like I don't want to overblow like the whole wide receiver conversation, but I also feel I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one of the most polarizing prospects in the entire draft in Treylon Burks. Justin, so much about his combine or measurables were just kind of overblown at the combine. What do the numbers show on him as a prospect in terms of, is he too slow? Is he too big? Is he going to be able to get separation from receivers? Because it's a huge thing in terms of like a debate as him as a prospect.
Yeah, I think this one also went too far the other direction, because Treylon Burks, if you watch his film and you don't even need computer vision for this, but his game speed is just fine. He's not out of range. I don't think he's what's the word I'm using? He's not like going to not get separation because he's so slow, but he's also not going to Tyreek Hill you. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
and that's okay though. He's in range. The thing that's special about him is his use. Like if you can really make use of him, like at or behind the line of scrimmage, now that would be interesting. Like everything. And look, it doesn't sound sexy to be like, this guy'd be great with a bubble screen, but ultimately, even as a runner, like is used as a running back, kind of like Debo, but like not right. His hands are strong. He comes down with the ball in short area. He wins in short area. And if you can use him, if your OC can figure it out, it's going to be great. But if your OC can't figure it out, then it's going to be a mess.
Oh, like yeah. I think you said it perfectly. Perfectly said.
So, but I'm not, his speed is not the thing. Like that's not the thing.
That's fascinating. And another thing, just kind of shifting back to the quarterbacks for a second, the Malik Willis question, I think a lot of people wonder, obviously he's talented, physically talented. He's a great kid from what I could tell. But, coming from the offense he played in, he scrambled a lot. He played behind, some kind of shoddy offensive line sometimes. He threw to run. He ran to throw a lot. What did the data come back for, with him? I saw who'd you have? Who was this comp?
I said Jalen Hurts because
Jalen Hurts, yeah.
You know who he really looks like is Steve McNair.
That's who he really does remind me of Steve McNair when I watch him.
Steve McNair is a little out of range for where I typically, like I usually try to keep it because the game of football changes so much over a finite period of time that Steve McNair is a little bit out of range for what I usually like to look at. But like, that's where he came up as very but Jalen Hurts has that too. So it's not dissimilar. I stand by it, but Jalen Hurts was more polished and faced much higher, like him coming out of college is not the same thing as Malik Willis coming out of college. I mean, Alabama is pretty good. So when I look at him, it's just interesting that, every quarterback needs a good teacher and every quarterback needs an opportunity to have a team be built around their specific style. You could not plop in Joe Burrow to the Ravens and have the same type of success as Joe Burrow has in Cincinnati. And which is amazing because he had a crappy O-line, but there are different types of quarterbacks. And maybe a better one is to say you couldn't plop Kirk Cousins into the Ravens and have that work out. That wouldn't be a good thing. You couldn't plop Lamar Jackson onto the Vikings and have it look the same. It wouldn't work. So you want both. You need to be able to create the system around you that accentuates all of the positives and the natural God-given traits that all of these guys have. But you also need to have the traits that somebody understands and the ability to learn and be taught to accentuate your positives. Because Malik Willis's athleticism is ridiculous. His ability to, his throwing on the run, like he is a running back. It's really interesting. And his improv skills, he can throw with great velocity off platform. These are all things that are really good for modern quarterbacks, right? Off platform throwing is like Josh Allen's secret sauce. It's Patrick Mahomes' secret sauce. That's what makes them really how I just see Patrick Mahomes, you are horizontal and that ball just traveled 40 yards. Like, I don't understand. The mechanics are incredible. So Malik Willis has that upside, but unfortunately for him, we don't know. There's a lot more risk. He's a riskier stock pick because, if you need him to start this year, I don't know what he knows about defenses. I don't know if he knows what he knows about defenses. It's very tricky. And by the way, Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford, like that, he didn't know defense. There's no, it's not a knock on him. It's like when we're all trying to get jobs coming out of college. If you have the internship at Goldman Sachs, pretty sure you know what it's like to work at Goldman Sachs a little bit better than if you have the internship at Sears and you're working in a warehouse and then you try to go to Goldman Sachs. It's just a different thing. So our resumes are what they are. It's our only, you get better at the more reps you take doing something, the better you're going to be at that thing. And that's everyone. So I love Malik Willis. I love his personality. I think he is a really interesting, fun player. I wish him the best. I'm from Michigan. I hope he doesn't become a Lion. And, that's just that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So
I will say this about the Lions. Ryan got a chance to ask Dan Campbell a question at the Senior Bowl, and it's one of those things where it's like, if Sean Payton, like if he was going to step down, like why couldn't he have stepped down like last season and Dan Campbell could have been the head coach? Because I truly feel like Dan Campbell have the Lions steering towards the right ship. Like he is a good NFL head coach, and I think that's very apparent just talking to him and hearing him talk. I think the Lions should just take Malik Willis at 2 and just have your quarterback of the future and move on. Something that I wanted to potentially ask you, and I don't know if you would have the data readily available, but something that Ryan and I have harped on, especially the last couple of seasons, but especially last season, is just how there has, like, in terms of skill position players on the Saints, that they are one of the least talented, excluding Alvin Kamara, they're one of the least talented teams in the NFL. We're hoping they can grab a wide receiver, a tight end somewhere in the draft. Is there anything of your numbers or statistics that confirms them being kind of in the poverty levels in terms of NFL skill position players?
I mean, I don't have that, I can tell you from watching that, when you wrap up all of that money into Michael Thomas and he's not on the field, that is a huge blow, not just to, because you're losing Michael Thomas, but also the opportunity cost of spending all of that money on someone else, right? Not to say he's not worth it, but when he's not on the field, that is a big loss. And the Saints have been very, very fortunate that, look, Alvin Kamara is awesome, obviously. And then, it's like the other guys step up in time, Taysom Hill is confusing, but he's been useful. And the O-line, I'm more worried with no Teron Armstead than I am about some other things on your team, right? So, it's sometimes the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that the Saints are really, a really good defense. It's funny because you would have said 10 years ago, the opposite would have been true, right? But the really good defense and the really good O-line, that makes up for a lot of problems. And how versatile the running back is, very, very helpful stuff, all helpful stuff. But it's, at some point, when when your money is wrapped up into someone who is not even on the field for a percentage of the time that matters, you're gonna be hurting.
Just with your time, I don't know how long you've been compiling statistics for prospects, and just go and look back for historical trends and stuff like that. But does your data kind of update over time to kind of perfect itself? And has it matched up with what's happening in the league? Like players that you had highly rated from your data, and then looking how they perform in the NFL, has it matched up, or has it kind of been a learning process where you had to kind of tweak some things?
You're constantly tweaking. I'm never going to be it's perfect, it's good. I think I have more wins than losses. I'm happy about that. It's obviously better once a player gets paired with a team, right? Operating in a vacuum, it's very hard because now you have 32 options for many players, not every player, but many players. There's 32 options of where they could go. And if they end up in a place that works for them, then that's wonderful. And it tends to be better. If they end up in a place that is not, then it tends to go worse, right? It's simple, but it's true. And then I look to see, okay, well, after they're paired, now what? And then obviously once we know where players go, everything gets a lot more accurate, right? There are some really truly historically relevant and true things about players ending up at certain spots and with certain other teachers and certain other people. For example, if the Bills were to take a cornerback in the first round, and let's say, one of the top 3-4, let's say Trent McDuffie fell to them, right? Trent McDuffie is probably the third or fourth best cornerback in this draft, and depend on maybe Andrew Booth, maybe him, whatever. But let's just say he's third or fourth. But if he were to end up with the Bills, he's going to look like a lot better than if he were to end up at the Lions, for example, because the Bills already have 2 marquee safeties in place. And when Tre'Davious White comes back, that will be a lot of help on the other side. So, when you have those factors combined, that actually is better. He'll probably have a longer career should he end up somewhere there than if Trent McDuffie were to be, the 3rd or 4th best corner, ends up on a team where he's got to be the man. Like maybe, even the Vikings who they brought back Patrick Peterson, but Patrick Peterson's probably not in his prime as much anymore. So he's going to have to really step up a little bit more. Right. So it really does matter. And is your defensive front good? Is it not? So there's nuance to all of it.
Have you been able to quantify the question of pass rush versus coverage? It's important to get great cover and that'll help your pass rush, or the pass rush helps your coverage. Have you been able to quantify that, or is it just simple of a question of what you like?
Well, the reality is they both matter. And, I've seen articles that go with both. I tend to believe that the shift from edge rushers coming off the edge to coming to the interior, the emergence of Aaron Donald and where he lines up, that didn't used to be where people were rushing from, right? You weren't getting in, there weren't as many interior guys. Well, and also an outside linebacker, remember, they're taking 2 more steps than a guy who has a hand down 43 defensive end. So if you're shortening the distance to something, there's going to be a lag time before offenses pick up how to stop that. So therefore you'll get a bit of an advantage. If you're Aaron Donald and you're coming, you just have to beat a guard. See ya. Right. So whereas a corner, that's that's 2 or 3 steps less. Think about it, than your edge rusher or than your outside linebacker, or traditional edge rusher or your outside linebacker. So it really, the answer is it really depends, right? The ideal would be to have 2 really good pass rushers and 2 really good corners, but who can do that?
Right.
There just aren't that many to go around, right? So, so it kind of depends. It kind of depends. It also, if you're in a division where there's a lot of crappy guards, and you have Aaron Donald, you're great. If you're in a division where the tackles aren't so good and you got Cam Jordan, then okay, that's great. Or if you're in a division where the O-lines are pretty good, then you probably need that strong corner because you need the extra second or 2, right? So there's no one answer that fits everything, right? The answer is what blend of pieces do you need on your specific team to win enough games for you to get into the playoffs? Because that's when, get into the playoffs, step 1, win in the playoffs, step 2, that's just how it goes.
I just want to say, going back to I think the point you're making, the social worker in me, just in terms of where a player goes, especially a rookie, and how their career is affected, it kind of just brought up the whole nurture versus nature kind of debate, and it's so fascinating because some players, there are some players, regardless of where they go, they're talented enough that potentially they can make it work anywhere. If Patrick Mahomes hadn't went to the Chiefs, if he went to the Niners or the Bears, there's a lot of possibility that he still be able to be Patrick Mahomes. Maybe, right? No. But the situation is so crucial into how all these incoming players work out. And I just think it's just a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. Look, the nurture and nature, just like you find in your social work, I'm sure it is both. There are some things, I don't know how many, everyone, I just remember Andrew Luck coming out of college and it was there's no more surefire, guy that's going to turn around your entire blah, 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 blah than this guy. And you're kind of well, he stepped into a pretty good Colts situation. It wasn't perfect, but it definitely way worse ones existed in that moment. But Peyton Manning had just happened to get hurt that last year. So, it's just an interesting dynamic of, I don't think you could put Patrick anywhere. And I love Patrick. Don't get me wrong. I think he's really, really special. but I don't think you could put him just anywhere and it go as well as it has. I mean, maybe you win a couple more games, but look at Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford now won a Super Bowl with his second team. With the Lions, he couldn't win a playoff game. Not one. And that's, I mean, they didn't make it to the playoffs very often, but then the 2 times he did, they couldn't get a win.
No, it's just a fascinating thing. I wish there were we could travel to multiverses and see quarterbacks with different teams to see how it will play out, but unfortunately that's impossible. But you are able to somewhat do that with computer vision, there is that. So
yeah, I mean, look, there are some traits that are, some nature traits that are, going to express more often in certain situations, and there are some things that are going to express almost regardless of the situation. Like being tall, you're not going to not be tall if you're on the Bengals versus if you're on the Lions. You're still going to be tall, and whether or not that matters is one thing, but there are some things that are just not going to change. But I would argue that a lot of things can be changed. Circumstantial.
I have one more football question for you. Then I just want to talk about the blow up in your career and just how great you're doing at the NFL Network and all the shows you're on, because we definitely want to give you your deserved shine. The player that blew up the combine, Jordan Davis, defensive tackle of Georgia. What does the numbers or potentially the data show of the positional value of a player that's a defensive tackle that may play 20 to 30 snaps a game, in terms of how important that is in an NFL defense?
I mean, he'll be a first round pick, not just because, the Georgia defense in general, it's cool that all of those guys blew up the combine. Georgia defense combine, wow, they totally nailed it. But the reality is that they all played together, showing you the value of how things work together. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to separate them. You have to look and see what the film says from college and how a defensive coordinator can use that, because not all defenses are the same. And by the way, now offenses all got better. So the quality of your competition, even though, SEC is really good. So, that's interesting, but ultimately it's going to take creativity and how do you value the opportunity versus someone else? Because remember, it's not just who they pick, it's the opportunity to pick someone else at that position. And that's what's really interesting, because in reality, I don't know, there's not a lot of this draft. There's a lot of guys who in normal years would be really strong late first round for early second round guys. So I don't know, who are you going to reach for? Because I don't know. And so I like him, but okay, not to be how much, maybe some teams view him as a guy who's really good at just stopping the run and that's it. And, there's not a lot of people who, how much do you pay for that? What do you think for that? Where's your, but okay. It's just how all it takes is kind of one, but I think that the way that defense was constructed makes them all look great. You can't, all of them are really good. I think he's the second best defensive tackle on his team, to be honest with you. So.
Very interesting.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I don't have any more questions. You can go ahead, Adam.
So really we loved you coming on, but I did want to give you your appropriate shine. Maybe I'm paying attention to it more this year than I did last year, but I feel like you are getting more opportunities to be on TV, to host things, to share your knowledge with an audience. And so first I wanted just to congratulate you on just the way your career is taking off, and just kind of just talk to us about how your grind has been for you to be where you are now, because it's definitely good to see you succeeding and see you thriving.
So kind. Thank you. Honestly, life's a little bit about luck and preparation part. you got to keep getting better, even when it's a little bit frustrating, because it takes a while to, analytics can, now you hear it in broadcast and I don't even know what it means anymore. Sometimes like, you'll hear during a game, someone will be like, oh, the analytics says to go for it or not. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, like, I don't even know what they're talking about right now. Like, and so it can be off-putting, and it is very nuanced and very detail oriented. But I think that, I think people do respect like passion for something, loving something, and like a command of the information. And I've learned a lot about kind of all of those things, right? I knew about I obviously have a pretty solid background in analytics and a very legit, I worked for a number of teams. Like I have, I was lucky. I paid my dues there, but, it takes a while to create something that's a little bit, that can feel so different in such an area like TV, where things are pretty similar a lot, like they don't change, TV doesn't change very fast. So thank you I really appreciate the support. Like it means a lot, because it's kind of hard to change the way people look at things after so long of doing things in one way, and change is always hard. Always.
No, it is. And I've been following you for a long time, and just, for you to go on there and then you come in there with analytics, and how people are with analytics in football. I mean, it's more accepted now, but there's still a lot of people that's just like, whatever. I don't care what your probability analysis says. It's, but the fact you bring it, and not only that, some people talk about analytics, like you said, it's just, they're not really selling it right. But when you talk about it and you kind of break down what your models are doing, how it gets the data, and why it means what it means, it has a more impact. That's why, when I hear a lot of people talk about it, I'm not trying to get them on the Saints Twitter podcast. I was like, I got to get Cynthia on here, because that stuff is really fascinating to me, what you're doing. So we really are happy to see, your grind is coming into fruition, and you having the success you're having, and I hope you have more.
Well, thank you so much. It really means a lot to me. You guys work really hard. I always appreciate it, and always make time to come on with people who are just like you guys, who are like, you just love it and you're just grinding and you have other jobs. Like, that's incredible. I have so much respect for that.
No, we appreciate it, truly. I did think of one last question, and it was one that I was driving home and I was like, I have to ask her this, and then I forgot it, and then I just remembered it. Trevor Penning. Mm-hmm. There's this thing where people bring up that he got like 16 or 19 holding penalties in college at a not a power school. And is there anything that shows that if an offensive lineman has a lot of holding penalties or what have you in college, that they may either have that same type of trend or may not be a good offensive lineman when they get to the NFL if they couldn't handle the college competition?
My question back would be, you got to watch all those, because I watched Trevor Penning's penalties, and I watched, look, there are a lot of things that are at play, and there are a lot of penalties. Now, some people will say that you can't fix that or make that go away. Other people will tell you that that's like, maybe his guard didn't, whose responsibility was it? And the guard was supposed to tap him, and like whatever, like, we don't know the reality. But if you have a plan and a system for kind of getting that out of them, you see it go both ways. So it is not like the correlation is not enough that is causal, meaning I don't know if there's some correlation, of course, like, because obviously people don't like holding penalties. No team likes to be punished for extra penalties when they don't have to. But at the end of the day, it's like, if he's getting, because I saw him get double and triple teamed quite a bit because he was very, very good. So some of that is like, well, like that won't happen in the NFL as much. So the context and the nuance of it really does matter, because, is it jumpiness, or is it like at some point you're getting held by three people? It's hard to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, or you're monster. A lot of people are in charge of trying to figure it out, and they're trying to trick you with this type of whatever. And who knows? Okay.
I hate hated to do it, but it's such a thing that's been just popping up over and over on the timeline and just various places. So I wanted to get it out there. Please, if you have not read Cynthia's column in regards to comparisons for quarterbacks in this draft class, please read it. It's an amazing, fascinating read. You can find Cynthia on NFL Network. Can you just, I know you do a plethora of shows, just let the listeners know where they can find you, where they can see you.
Yeah, so for this draft season, I'm on Path to the Draft, which is every day, but I'm on 3 days a week. And then I'm also on Total Access. And then next week for the draft, I'll be on our digital coverage and then on the main set on the main coverage, but I'll be from Inglewood on the third day. But the digital draft coverage is actually really cool. So I'm very excited to people for that.
Well, it's next week. Christmas is quickly approaching. Ryan and I will be in Vegas and ready to have a ball or cry with the Saints draft picks, regardless of how it goes. But please read Cynthia's column, catch her on NFL Network. She's just a star at this point, and so we really appreciate you for coming on. And it was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Cynthia.
With that, we're out.
Peace.
Denim is in demand at Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston. Get cash on the spot for everything denim. Bring in your trendy and classic styles of gently used name brand denim. Get paid for your denim shorts, skirts, jackets, jeans, and more. We're looking for denim that is blue, black, or a bold color, and jeans in styles like mom jeans, bootcut, baggy, flared, and ripped. We want everything denim. Sell your denim for cash at Plato's Closet today. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.